Martin McGuinness, you spoke recently about the fact that Sinn Féin's facing into three elections. There's the Westminster 2015 election and the Republic and Assembly elections in Northern Ireland, both happening in 2016. From those three, can Sinn Féin achieve a united Ireland?
Well, I certainly think that the three elections can propel us forward along that road. Obviously, Sinn Féin, like all of the other parties in the North, have signed up to various agreements that have been made over the course of recent years. So I intend to remain faithful to those agreements. At the same time, I am an Irish Republican. Sinn Féin is an Irish Republican party. We're a party that has ambitions to be in government north and south and to be part eventually of an Irish government that governs all of Ireland's 32 counties. So I certainly think that continuing to build our political strength, to use our mandates in a way that delivers for citizens, not just in the context of our primary political objective, the reunification of Ireland, but also delivering for people in terms of the social and economic agendas that are bearing down so badly on people as a result of the economic downturn of the last number of years and the austerity agenda.
And has that been the game plan for you and Gerry Adams since the early 80s? That a lot of people think that this is what you're aiming for, that in 2016 you as Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, or First Minister, whichever, and Gerry Adams, possibly in government at that stage, would be standing together on O'Connell Street and saying, we've achieved it, guys, we've come to a united Ireland, we're in power north and south.
Well, our objective is to achieve by purely peaceful and democratic means the reunification of our people and our country. And that will take however long it takes to do. If I stand on O'Connell Street along with Gerry Adams and he's in government in Dublin and I'm in government here in the north, that doesn't give us the united Ireland that we aspire to. But it certainly propels us, I think, well along that road. And I think from our perspective, what we have to do is recognise that we have a very important anniversary coming up. We are Irish Republicans. Our allegiance is to the proclamation of 1916 and the heroes who gave their lives, but our allegiance is also to the people of Ireland, north and south. And I include in that the Unionist people of the north. So the transition to where we need to go needs to be managed in, I think, a pragmatic but very intelligent and indeed compassionate fashion.
And of course your relationship first with Ian Paisley and now with Peter Robinson, I know it's been rockier, but of course there has been this recent settlement, and a lot of people have praised, in fact some people have criticised your ability to get on with Unionists. But what do you say to people in the south who say they would leave the country if Sinn Féin got into government, or their stomachs would turn if Sinn Féin got into government? People who politically cannot accept that a party that was associated with the IRA campaign would inherit the political earth. What would you say to them, to reach out to them?
Well, first of all, I would say in relation to the initial part of your question, I don't have any difficulty getting on with Unionists and Unionist leaders. It was Ian Paisley, whenever we first sat down, for one of the very first conversations that we had, said to me, you know, Martin, and these are his words, not mine, we can rule ourselves. We don't need these people coming over from England telling us what to do. That was common ground that both of us, I felt, could stand on. And my relationship with Ian Paisley during the course of that year that he was First Minister and I was Deputy First Minister, I think, you know, people looked at that with some considerable amazement, that people coming from such a diametrically opposed backgrounds, his allegiance to what he calls the United Kingdom, my allegiance to Ireland, could actually come together and provide government for people here in the north, stabilising the peace process, taking important economic decisions, going together to the United States and starting a process which continued over a number of years of attracting more foreign direct investment to the north, providing jobs for our young people than at any other time in the history of the state. So I say that if I can do that with Unionist leaders, and I've also done that with Peter Robinson very successfully in terms of attracting jobs to the north, I think if I can do that, I can do that with anybody.
including people in the south who don't want to see Sinn Fein in government, who are afraid of Sinn Fein in government?
Well, people will have their opportunity during the course of the election to cast their vote. I respect the right of everyone to cast their vote in whatever way they think fit. But the reality is that there has been a dramatic increase in support for Sinn Fein over the course of recent years in the south. And I think it is safe to predict, because ye in the media are all predicting it, that at the next election it will probably even be more dramatic than we've seen in the last couple of years. The important thing is that we use the mandate that we are given by the Irish people in the interests of the people of Ireland. I don't think anybody can accuse me of not using the mandate that I have been given here in the north to bring about the most incredible change in terms of ending war, ending conflict, and hopefully now, as a result of the agreement that we made in the Stormont House talks, be facing into what I think is the next essential stage of our process, and that is the reconciliation phase. And when I speak about reconciliation, I don't just talk about reconciliation between Unionists and Nationalists and Republicans, or Catholics and Protestants, or dissenters. I talk about reconciliation between all of them, but also, just as importantly, reconciliation between all of the people who live on the island of Ireland. I think that's achievable, and I think that if people keep to the commitments that they made in the Stormont House Agreement, there is every probability that we can push on, even in the face of the very difficult economic circumstances that we face, to provide a better future for everybody.
Gerry Adams has been scathing about Enda Kenny's personal involvement in those talks and David Cameron's. On the other hand, Enda Kenny has said, you are much easier to talk to. You're someone who's been much more willing to do a deal. Where does the truth lie?
Well, the truth is that you couldn't put a cigarette paper between where Gerry Adams and I are coming from in relation to the negotiations that we have been through. Gerry Adams and I have been through some of the most historic negotiations that this island has ever seen. The Good Friday negotiations, the St Andrews negotiations, the Hillsborough negotiations, and of course the Stormont House negotiations. Now, I know that there's all sorts of cut and thrust in politics in Dublin.
And there's a lot of people saying that these days you have to wait to get a deal with Sinn Fein until Gerry comes up from Dublin, comes in at the last minute and gives his yay or nay. Is that true?
Well, the people who say that are our political opponents. There is absolutely no truth in that whatsoever. The reality is that we are a collective leadership. We've never made any secret of that. Gerry Adams and I have a very close political relationship for a lifetime. And I think from our perspective, we're very conscious that we lead a party that is at the heart of some of the most historic decisions ever taken on the island of Ireland, particularly in relation to the peace process, and that our futures are bound together. So obviously there will be people out there who will try to score political points. I understand that. That's the nature of politics. I try not to score political points. I in fact, leave the political debate that occurs in terms of what is happening in Dublin to Sinn Fein in Dublin, to our political representatives who are very capable, Mary Lou McDonald, Pierce Doherty, Paddy McLaughlin, Gerry Adams, and indeed many others. And because I sit on the North-South Ministerial Council with the Taoiseach, I mean, this is a ministerial group where we have Unionist ministers, you have myself and other Sinn Fein ministers, and you have Irish government ministers, then I am reluctant to be personally critical of anybody. I think,
including Enda Kenny.
No, I think I have to work with people. I think it's very precious that over the course of a peace process that means so much to the people of Ireland, that we all develop positive working relationships. My party has been critical of Enda Kenny, critical of the policies adopted by his government, and they have been well articulated. In this interview, I want to speak for what is happening here in the north and how that impacts on the lives of people here, but also at the same time not to distance myself in any way from the positions adopted by Sinn Fein representatives in the interviews that they do. That's politics. We have it here. Peter Robinson and I are in government together. There are issues that we disagree about. There are issues that we in Sinn Fein disagree with the Taoiseach about, particularly in relation to austerity. And Gerry Adams and I are at one on that.
But you mentioned austerity, and of course, one of the things that is going to be changing now, you have got that agreement, and there is going to be more autonomy here, is of course there's going to be a change in the hugely subsidised economy and the budget of this part of the island. Now, the accusation is that in the south you're out campaigning against austerity, out campaigning against water charges. Here you have domestic rates. I think it's something like 30,000 water meters being installed ahead of a decision on water charges in 2016, 20,000 odd civil servants to be laid off over the next number of years and so on. That these are policies of cutback, if not austerity, that you're pursuing in the north while you're out on the streets in the south.
Well, let me first of all deal with the whole issue of water. I was part of an administration under the leadership of Seamus Mallon and David Trimble, and how far back is that? You're talking about 12, 13, 14 years ago, where the British government were attempting, and indeed there was a tendency in some of the parties in the institution that I was part of as Minister of Education to go along with it, but we in Sinn Fein resisted it, and that was to impose water charges on the north. We have no water charges in the north.
But you have got water meters being installed ahead of a decision that's due on water charges in 2016.
The water meters were installed under the tutelage of the Department of Regional Development, and they've now made a statement that that was a huge mistake, should not have happened. There has been no decision taken, and I don't believe that there will be a decision taken by any administration here in the north to impose water charges. And I've had those discussions with Peter Robinson and with other colleagues on the executive. We're absolutely adamant about that. And all you have to do is go out into the streets, ask people, do they pay water charges? People pay on their domestic rates for water. Are we going to impose additional water charges on them? Not in a million years.
But people are paying, isn't that the point? It depends on what you call it.
People pay their rates, absolutely, and they have done so from time immemorial.
Which of course were abolished in the south.
But those rates have been kept to a minimum here in the north. And we have recognised, even in the face of pressure from Westminster, where they tried to get us to impose water charges over and above the rates that people are paying at the moment. And we have refused to do it. And we have no intention whatsoever of doing it.
How conscious are you when you're making decisions about the economy here, though, and you are going to be dealing with a tighter and tighter budget? Now, you will, of course, have fundraising powers in other areas and so on. But how conscious are you of having to tailor your policies here in the north to suit Sinn Féin's electoral needs in the south?
No, we tailor our policies to meet the needs of the people that we represent here in the north. There's an awful lot of nonsense spoken about how we decide our policies here in the north, and people align it to, well, they won't do this or they won't do that because of the situation in the south. First thing that people have to remember is that we are an all-Ireland party. Second thing that they need to remember, it's all right to be an all-Ireland party. It's all right to have political aspirations, to bring about the reunification of this country by peaceful and democratic means.
Your critics say it's not all right to have a mixed message, to say one thing in the north and do another thing in the south.
Well, I don't think we do that, because I think from our perspective in relation to the differences between north and south is that in the south, Enda Kenny would consider that he leads a sovereign government. We're a devolved institution. We don't have the flexibilities or the levers that the Taoiseach has or the government in the south has in relation to how they deal with the economic pressures that have come about as a result of the greed of bankers and planners and builders in the south. Different situation completely, and those people who try to make out, for example, as I've heard nonsensically in the course of recent times, at a time when we are trying to rebalance our economy, I hear people saying things like 20,000 people are going to lose their jobs in the north. 20,000 people are not going to lose their jobs in the north. What we have put in place is a voluntary exit strategy. That will apply to people who wish to, as they come close to retirement, leave the public and civil services. And that against the backdrop of, if
so
it's
that's
affordable.
20,000 voluntary redundancies over a period of how long?
Well, I haven't put a figure. See, other people have put a figure on it. I haven't put a figure on it. This is on the basis of those people who wish to take up a voluntary exit strategy. So it's not compulsory redundancy, it's not even voluntary redundancy. as a voluntary exit strategy for those people who are coming close to retirement, who believe that it's acceptable for them and suits their purposes to leave at that time. At the same time, if it's affordable, what we are very focused on is how we can, if the powers, and they appear to be going through Westminster at the moment, in relation to giving us the ability to decide our own rate of corporation tax, how we can then use that to employ, in our estimation, anything up to 50,000 new jobs.
Couple of quick questions. First of all, in relation to the Westminster election, you see Peter Robinson referring a lot to the potential for unionist votes to be crucial in a hung parliament. Sinn Fein, of course, has an abstentionist policy. But if the Scottish nationalists were to come along and say, Martin and Jerry, bring over your Sinn Fein seats and we could break apart the union from the inside, would you be part of that?
Well, I think the Scottish nationalists have more respect for Sinn Féin than to even think about doing that. I have a very good relationship with Alex Salmon. I have a very good relationship with the new First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. I think they respect our republicanism. They respect the fact that we have a mandate from our people, from our constituencies, not to take our seats in Westminster or to concede by doing that the British government have a right to rule over us. That's a very principled Republican position.
And circumstances won't change it?
And it's okay to be a Republican. Well, I think, first and foremost, what we need to see is the outcome of the election. And those people who offer up the notion that the Democratic Unionist Party, Sinn Féin, or the SDLP would be decisive in any way in the formation of the next government, I think are living in cloud cuckoo land. I think the next government in Britain is going to be decided between the Tory party, UKIP, the Labour Party and the Scottish Nationalists. I have a very clear view that that's how it's going to shake down, whatever way it shakes down between either a Tory-led or a Labour-led administration.
Will you definitely be standing in the Assembly elections in 2016 here in Northern Ireland?
I've always said if my health holds out and if my party and the people wish me to continue with the work, I am prepared to do that because, you know, we still face huge challenges. We've seen that over the course of the last 2 years. There are people in the extremes of loyalism and there are people on the extremes of so-called republicanism who are still determined to bring down these institutions. I think it's very important that we continue to stand together against the extremes and against those who would try to plunge us back to the past.
So you still think you're needed? You're needed at the top here in the north?
Well, I mean, let's not be ageist about this. You know, I still consider myself fairly young. I still consider myself as someone who has a lot to offer. I hope that my contribution to this peace process over the last 20 years is something to be proud of. And I think that as long as my health holds out, as long as my intelligence holds out, I will continue to do the work. When I became an Irish Republican, I didn't become an Irish Republican to retire at retirement age. I became an Irish Republican to go to my grave as an Irish Republican and to do everything that I possibly can in the intervening period to bring about the peaceful and democratic reunification of my country.
Because on the way here we were talking about, I mean, yourself and Jerry have been at the top of the Republican movement since the early 80s really, and we were trying to figure out how many different party leaders you have both outlasted. I think we got to a couple of dozen. You have both been around for a long time in politics. Is it time, for the sake of the party, for both you and Jerry Adams to make room for other people? And maybe 2016 would be the time to do that, would it? Is that a discussion that's been going on within the party?
Well, let me look at it this way. I mean, there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not Hillary is going to run for the presidency next year.
In the United States?
Yeah, Hillary Clinton in the United States. And Hillary is older than both Jerry and myself. So let's not be ageist about this. This is about people's ability to continue to deliver for the constituencies that they represent. I'm very fortunate in that I'm in government in the North on the basis of equality alongside Peter Robinson. I think the Republican nationalist people of the North, and I include in that many unionists also, actually like that because they identify me as being, I think, a progressive politician, someone who is prepared to reach out the hand of friendship, someone who's prepared to take difficult decisions, someone who's prepared to be part of what others think are uncomfortable action for reconciliation. And I think that as long as I have something to contribute to that sort of work, then I should continue to contribute. And if you want to talk about ageism, and there's been a lot of talk about this in the course of the last number of years, and it's around my relationship with the British Queen, a woman that I've met on 3 occasions, and she is much, much older than I am. But if you look at her visit to Dublin, you look at her visit to Cork, you look at the acts of reconciliation that she and I have been involved in, I regard her, even though she is at an elderly stage of her life, as someone who sets a very powerful example to many backwoods people who are out there who refuse to become involved in the reconciliation process. So I think as long as people have a contribution to make in that regard, one thing that they shouldn't do, and I would offer this up not in any arrogant way, but people in this island should not be complacent about the peace process, should not be complacent about where we've come from, should not be complacent about the fact that there are still people out there who are determined to bring it down. And I think they should stand by those who are going to continue to deliver what the Irish people voted for when in the referendum in 1998 they voted for peace.
And in your political lifetime, and as you say, you intend that to continue for a while yet, you have seen such remarkable change, you know, here in this office compared with where you come from, all that you lived through. Do you think you are, in your political lifetime, going to see the republic that you promised the Ordesh in 1986 when Rory O'Brodick and the others were walking out and you were saying, stick with us, we will lead you, I and Gerry Adams, we will lead you to the republic. Are you going to see that in your political lifetime?
Well, I am going to work to see that in my political lifetime. And if I don't see it in my political lifetime, I hope my children will see it in their lifetimes. You see, the important thing is that historically speaking, huge events have happened here over the course of the last 20 years. People thought there would never have been a Good Friday Agreement. People thought when we said the day would come when Sinn Fein would be speaking to the British government that we needed our heads examined. And of course, you look at the Good Friday Agreement, you look at the St Andrews Agreement. I remind people about the conversation I had with Tony Blair just after Sinn Fein and the DUP became the largest parties in the north. Myself and Gerry Adams went to Downing Street. We met with Tony and with Jonathan Powell. There was just 4 of us in the room. And Tony was at the point of despair about the failure of the Ulster Unionists to come in ahead of the Democratic Unionists. And he spoke for 6 or 7 minutes about the need to get David Trimble and the Ulster Unionists back into pole position. And I said, Tony, about 6 or 7 minutes in, hold on a minute, that isn't going to happen. In my view, the DUP are going to be the major political force within unionism for the foreseeable future. And Tony said to me, well, Martin, well, I also said, what we need to do is get the DUP into government with Sinn Fein. And Tony said, but sure, Ian Paisley will never share power with you. And I said, well, I don't accept that. Well, it took a couple of years, but that's what transpired. And I think that's what gives people hope, that these transformative incidents and things that happen, and I mean, for all the faults that there are, and they've been widely articulated about the working of the institutions here because of what people perceive as divisions. In fact, as Peter Robinson and I have been in government here for the last 7 years, and unlike whenever David Trimble and Seamus Mallon were in power when the institutions collapsed on 3 occasions, these institutions have not collapsed once. So I think, you know, we need to recognise that huge things are happening, that powerful things are happening. There are still major challenges to face in the road ahead, but I am very determined to face into those challenges, and I believe that now, particularly on foot of the Stormont House Agreement, there is a very real opportunity for all of us to move decisively forward and deal with things that really impact on people, not just here in the north, but through the auspices of the North-South Ministerial Council. The issues that affect people in their daily lives. For example, the construction of the radiotherapy unit at Altnagelvin Hospital, funded by us and by the Irish government, to treat people from Derry, from Tyrone and from Donegal. The recent decision taken by our health service here in relation to children's heart surgery happening in Dublin. The fact that people from Cavan and Monaghan are being treated in the New South West Hospital in Fermanagh. Now, we need to think in an all-Ireland way. We need to think in terms of developing our education services, developing our health services, developing our economy. What works for us on the island of Ireland is for us to be seen to be working together to deliver for all of our people. And I think we can do that without injury, if you like, to people's political aspirations.
Sounds like you intend to see off a few more party leaders anyhow while you achieve all of that. Martin McGuinness, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this afternoon. Thank you.